Hello, and welcome to this afternoon session of Neuroverse Live. My name's Shelley Tanner, and I am the CEO and founder of Haystack. And today I want to talk about pre-employment assessments. Really, what I want to talk about in particular is how to understand them from the standpoint of how they interact with our neurodivergent candidates. So they're being more widely used, and I want to draw attention to some of the areas that we should be on the lookout for. So here's a little agenda, not important, helps me to feel like I have a place to hang my hat, a bunch of things that I'll be going over, but most of all, what I'm going to continue to do is just be raising places that we need to have our eyes open, and that things are changing so fast, but I think as an interested group of people, hopefully we can be questioning these things, and I'm hoping to dig into why. So what is a pre-employment assessment? Here are just some definitions on the screen. It is exactly what you would think it is. Before employment, some kind of evaluation. Very, very simple. We've been using them for a really long time. So there is documented evidence back to 206 BC in China of actual cognitive tests. Now, if you scoot all the way up into 2024, what's really taking over, not just the digital world of the 90s and the O's, but AI. So that's one of the things I'm going to be digging into. So first of all, we're going to take a whistle-stop tour through different kinds of assessments. They can be broken down into different kinds of buckets. So some of these contain the others within them, but this is the way that I see it. And I'm going to be drawing our attention to particular things. So the first one I'm going to go over is cognitive tests. So what is a cognitive test? Just as you would imagine, it's testing cognition, testing our mind, testing our thinking. So different kinds of things that can be tested, math, language, and so on. And the important thing here to look at is what exactly are we testing for? Things like pattern recognition, problem solving, adapting, and so on. And the thing to be aware of here is some of these things might, perk up in our ears. These are things that neurodivergent candidates tend to have in higher supply than their neurotypical peers. However, these cognitive ability tests are not always what we're focused on when we're looking at people. So I'm going to get into more of these things, but I just want to draw our attention to this. And this is not one of the most widely used tests. Personality tests, on the other hand, when you think of assessments, or when we think of assessments, this is probably where we go in our mind, personality tests. But as you can see here, it's just one of many, and there are many problems with it. So personality tests, what they're looking for is people's compatibility, their behavior, their character traits. And up the top there in the red, I have the three big main ones that we hear of, the big five, DISC, and the Myers-Briggs, or the MBTI. So I'm going to go over each one of those very quickly. Myers-Briggs. So in Myers-Briggs, we're looking at people where they fall along on a pathway between the set of characters on the left and the set of characteristics on the right. So if you mix these things up, you end up with 16 different combinations somebody can end up with, and they're being asked a forced multiple choice question like this one. So this is my Myers-Briggs, ENFJ. Doesn't really mean anything in particular, but I do think that these tests can be helpful in terms of understanding one another from a communication standpoint, educational. But here is one of the big problems. So Myers-Briggs themselves, so the Myers-Briggs and Foundation, if you were to look on their website, you would see this statement. It is not ethical to use MBTI instrument for hiring or deciding job assignments. So I just want you to remember that. And then when I get into some of the data about how this is being used, understand that while this is being stated, it is not what's being done in practice. If you want to dig a little bit more into some of the Myers-Briggs history and some of the challenges, you can check out this documentary. It's on Netflix called Persona, The Dark Truth Behind Personality Tests. Really gets into the history of the Myers-Briggs there. So the second of the three main personality assessments is the Big Five. Here we're looked at on a spectrum with respect to these 5 different characteristics. So if you look at the third one down, extroversion, again, without me even getting really into the details of why this is problematic, if someone's being tested on their ability to be extroverted, I mean, if you're being asked a question like, am I the life of the party? What do you say if you're not? Like, not should I be? What do they want? You're being asked this. For what? You're being asked this is if it's a pre-employment assessment, right? So, and maybe you are the life of the party, but maybe that's just today. Anyway, so thinking about the way that people think neurocognitively in very, very different ways, hopefully you can see that these kinds of things can be problematic. This is the final of the three, DISC. This is probably more widely used in the workplace. And the difference between DISC and the other two is DISC is really looking at what is our dominant trait or dominant characteristic. So if you're familiar with this, you've probably seen this round visual with the different colors in it before, with those 4 different things, the D, I, and the S, and the C. Looking at situational things. So do I want to lead a project? You have to pick an answer. And if you're someone that's going to answer, I want to lead the group, you're probably going to end up with a lot of your profile hanging in that D quadrant up there. You can see a high D. Now, again, this is a personality assessment, and personality assessments, because cognitively they're not taking into account the person who's answering, they don't provide reliable data and can reveal data that is considered protected. If it reveals something about someone's personality that's related to a medical condition or a disability, we'll get into that in a little bit. So this is a third of the 6 types, and this is something I want to draw attention to. Motivation, a very, very undervalued type of assessment, even if it's done on a very casual basis. So here are some of the more data-driven methods of testing assessment. There's this Haystack model. You can look down in that chart. You can probably think of people you know who are more on the side of being a persuader. Maybe they work in sales. Someone who's more of a thinker. Maybe they're working in some kind of analysis, a scientific position. But we know that our friends, our colleagues who are thinkers don't do very well in the doer kind of roles, and vice versa. So this is something I think is a really undervalued thing. Here's another assessment here called the career value scale. They just ask questions. Would you enjoy doing ... So seems like something really, really simple. But if we're looking at someone's success in the workplace and something pre-employment, I know that we look at motivation once you get into workplace. We're all taught as managers what motivates your employee. Why aren't we looking at it earlier? So I've got a visual here. I put a little key on there because for those of you familiar with this book, it's a book from the 1960s. Seems very, very old. It's called What Color is Your Parachute? But really, the book encourages people not to think from the job perspective, but to think from the human side. What is their interest? What is their passion? What is their drive? What is their motivation? And so on. Anyway, so I just want to hover on this one so that it sticks in your mind. Motivation, important, undervalued. Next one I'm going to talk about is the EQ, emotional intelligence, something that's gained a lot more traction in recent years. And what are we looking at when we're looking at EQ? Really looking at someone's ability to know their own emotions and the emotions of others and be able to regulate those. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. Here's one of the examples and it's the one that you can see there marked in red, showing an image of someone's face and then asking the test taker to judge the emotion. And you can see a little scale there. So the challenge is alexithymia, someone's inability to either know their own emotions or emotions of others, is something that is prevalent with autistic individuals. So if you have alexithymia, the only way you would be able to answer this is by rote, having learned that, someone having taught you. So very, very problematic. Here's another type of EQ assessment. I am aware of the emotions of the people around me. What if you're not and you have alexithymia and you say never? Has that revealed protected information about you, saying I am never aware of the emotions of people around me? So here we can see challenges with neurodivergent job seekers. Okay. The last two here, when we have integrity, it's exactly what you would think it is. The interesting thing here is with autistic job seekers in particular, it's often somewhere that they shine is their, a values-based identity, and then an autistic person being their word. It's not difficult for them to be honest. However, with these kinds of tests, there are a lot of laws that are wrapped up with it. Laws that have been around for a while. There's a case that took place not that long ago in Massachusetts. And then there is the federal polygraph protection test. There's some other things to be aware of there. But with integrity, basically any time that you're testing whether someone's lying or not, we have to be aware that there has to be a really good reason for it, or we're sticking into legal hot water. So the last one there, just going to kind of skip over this one. Skills testing, exactly what you would think it was going to be. Testing someone for their actual ability to do a particular skill. So jumping now into how they're being used today. So here, really what I want to get across is almost everybody's using them. Pre-employment assessments are being used prolifically throughout all organizations for different reasons and in different ways, but still their use has increased dramatically over the last 20 years, particularly over the last 10 years, and it's becoming more and more rapid, the increase. So I highlighted one of them there. If you look, 34%. So more than 1/3 of employers are administering personality tests. So if we recall back to some of the things I said about it being challenging in terms of A, revealing protected information, and B, being not taking into account the cognitive differences of the test taker, this is being used by 1 out of every 3 employers. So here we can see there is a bit of a challenge happening with how we're trying to produce work better and how we're actually keeping, allowing our progress to hinder very particular people. So why are people using it? Basically to make better decisions, getting more resumes in faster and unable to decode them. And the truth of it is, you see the data there, we're actually quite bad at hiring, like a 50% shot. That's actually our hiring success. And then the cost of it is low. So there's a driving force behind needing to be better. And what's happening is the proliferation of assessments, and even more than that, bringing in artificial intelligence, and I'm going to get into in a minute. So the benefits of using pre-employment assessments is that they can bring objectivity. When you have a human, you don't have the same objectivity. When you have a system, you can ensure everybody's getting the same thing, so you have the chance of reducing bias. You're able to scale, which is a big thing looked for by all organizations, and then predictive validity. You're able to get the results. The challenge is, on the other side of things, ironically, you can see that a lot of these assessments, because they haven't been analyzed for all audiences, open themselves up for the potential of bias. There's a number of other things there, many of them interacting with neurodivergent candidates, like the candidate experience, being traumatized by being a test taker, being confused with the questions, being asked about people's emotions. So all of these things, misinterpretation of data. None of these tests have been validated for neurodivergent audiences, none of them, but they're being used. So we have a data and a validity problem there. And as you can see, they're being used more and more. So we just have to be aware of this. So we're going to dig a little bit more into the bias. There's different kinds of ways that people are being impacted culturally, cognitively, socioeconomically. Culturally, again, going back to the documentary, one of the examples Persona brings up is that there is actually a nonprofit in New York City that helps young Black men understand the questions in the Myers-Briggs. Right? A whole organization exists for that, right? It's because culturally those questions don't make sense. For a neurodivergent job seeker, cognitively, those standard tests, they're not accounting for the different thinking style. And then socioeconomically, not everybody has access to the same things. So many, many, many challenges. Here, I'm actually not really going to go into these, but I'll just leave these up for a second. But as I mentioned, these tests are being used more and more, and how they're being used more and more is artificial intelligence is being brought into it. And I'll just draw attention to one of the examples on there. It's the easy one to understand. In September 2023, iTutor Group was forced to pay a settlement because they actually had something programmed in where their artificial intelligence automatically rejected, there's a spelling mistake there, sorry, rejected women over 55 and men over 60. So the challenge is, like, how would we ever know that? And this kind of thing, it isn't being maybe so overtly programmed in, but I'm going to get into a little bit more why we're unable to see that. The latest case that's in the news is Workday, and Workday is used by more than 10,000 employers. And Workday now has a class action lawsuit against them. And the challenge that Workday is going to face is that they are going to have to account for how the hiring decisions have been made. And the courts decided that the important thing was they determined that Workday was what they consider to be an agent, not the employer. So Workday was who decided who went on and who didn't. There's the result of this hasn't been determined yet, but keep your eyes out. This is something that has been happening in July and August of this year. So just in general, legal red flags to think about. Does it violate, or does it have the potential to violate, the American Disabilities Act? So an example of that is the thing that I talked about with alexithymia. If you were actually determining, look, this person has no ability to determine others' emotions, you may be able to detect that and link that to a disability or somebody's different cognitive ability. Is it being used in an equitable way? This is a general HR rule. We know this one, right? And then there are specific state laws, the Massachusetts one about lie detector tests. Excuse me. And then in New York, we have the law, the very, very recent law that banned automated decisions. It's very, very loose because you just have to prove that you've done an audit and provided the required notices. But you can see these laws are coming in. We're going to have to become more aware. And they're coming in because of people like us that are saying this is not okay. What's happening is not okay. It's not okay to cut out women over 55 and men over 60. It's not okay to cut out particular people. So here's a document that you can look at for yourself, the EEOC fact sheet. I've got a link there. You can have this presentation. So there's some tips for employers there. And then if you want to get a little bit more into understanding employment assessments and hiring, take a look at this book. It was published this year. I've got the author's URL up there, and fantastic book. And it's the only one of its kind. And she really digs into what I believe is one of the biggest challenges is the first point that I have there, GIGO, meaning garbage in, garbage out. So if we're looking at an individual on the basis of data that doesn't accurately represent them, and then that's what we're using for our decision making, we are going to have garbage out in terms of the result for the individual and for the organization. So Helka also goes into the difference between correlation and causation and talks a little bit more about that. So I highly recommend this book. But I'm going to give one example there of what the difference is between correlation and causation. So she talks a lot about people that are being looked at for jobs and what kinds of things might correlate to a successful candidate. So a successful candidate in the eyes of AI there has to be some proxy information that says, okay, this is how I've defined a successful candidate. Now, the AI goes and it looks and it sees, okay, Here are all the people in the past that were successful, and here are all the current people. And artificial intelligence decided that Jared was the best match based on a set of data, because in the past, there were lots of Jareds who were successful. And in the past, there were also lots of people from Harvard who were successful. And guess what? These people also played lacrosse. This is real. This is actually this is a real story. Lacrosse, Ivy League, and Jared. Jared is a specific name. So how does this happen? How did Jared get picked? So we have to, in order to understand that, we have to look a little bit more at what AI is. And I'm sorry, I'm going to try to do this as simply as possible. But basically, AI is run, or this kind of AI, generative AI, it's run on something called a large language model. We've all probably heard LLM. So what is a large language model? It's a system that's trained on a massive amount of data. And then that system uses algorithms to process it. But the thing is, it's not processing the data. It's processing through a language model. So it's taught when the word bank is next to this, it means somewhere you put your money, or when the word bank is next to this, it maybe means the side of a hill. So the machine is deciding on the language to use to ask the question. So it's not finding a pre-written answer from something that's already been proven. It makes up its own mind based on patterns that it learned through when it was trained. But what happens if the human who trained it was biased? Those biases are hidden. And what happens if that language model then perpetuates those and makes decisions on the basis of it? What happens is that Jared, who went to Harvard and plays lacrosse, is always going to get a job over somebody else that I'm going to go into in a minute. So where is AI being used in hiring? It's being used to understand job descriptions, decoding those, helping us go through those faster, conducting resume parsing and matching, automated responses, and also some responsibility in interviewing. I'm not going to get into that. But the thing that I want to talk about is the resume parsing and matching, because almost every organization is using this. And this term resume parsing, all it simply means is that there is a computer system that is taking each resume, extracting all of the data from it, and putting it into predefined categories. And then based on selected keywords, matching those. So this is back to the garbage in, garbage out. Does the resume adequately and accurately reflect the skills and capabilities of the individual? Some of the things like the cognitive tests, if someone has very high level of pattern recognition, it's not being reflected or being matched to. So this resume parsing is used by almost every organization. So this is something that we have to be on the watch for. So let's say that you had a child after college and you stayed home for a bit, or you went to Howard University, or your name's Youssef El Mahadi, or you went to Sigma, you're a member of Sigma Kappa. You can look at some of these things on this list here. Any one of these things on this list is enough to have you dumped before you are even seen, because you have an employment gap, you attended a school that does not represent a success metric from the past, age indicators, gender indicators. I have friends who won't name their daughters female-sounding names. Why should parents have to think about that? Anyway, so this is what AI is doing, and we're not seeing it. We're not seeing why Jared is getting the job all the time. These people are being rejected. So here's a real-life scenario, and we're almost done. So this is somebody that I know personally in my life, John Smith. So John Smith applied to a medical science position. He had a medical science degree, graduated from college, and had limited work. He applied for every single medical science job that was available within a reasonable distance from where he lived for 3 years. The challenge is that John Smith, he has trouble making eye contact during an interview because he's quite introverted. He looks at his shoes a lot. And he also gives really, really short answers to questions, no matter how open-ended they are, because he's quite introverted. So this is what happened to John Smith. John Smith decided that it was better for him to not continually apply and be rejected and just play video games and be depressed. And this was his life. And this is the life of so many autistic and neurodivergent job seekers. So let's dig a little bit more into the job that John Smith was applying for. So XYZ Lab is looking for a medical scientist. And if we dig into the real criteria of what would make somebody successful in that job, not someone being able to look you in the eye, but somebody that has attention to detail. And not somebody who can give prolific, verbose answers to questions, but somebody that has really great pattern recognition. So John Smith matches all of the requirements that would make him an excellent medical scientist. But unfortunately, what's happening in AI is we're taking away the ability to match on the right information. Neurodivergent and autistic job seekers are being left behind. And that's why we see the statistics that we're seeing. So finishing up here, what do we need to do? What can we do? First of all, we just have to be aware. We have to be on the lookout. And I know we all are, but it's really hard when things are baked into AI and it's happening so fast, and it's difficult to understand the different kinds of artificial intelligence and large language models and algorithms and the things that go into it. But we do need to think, are we being inclusive? Are we considering different cognitive styles from the outset, not later? Like, oops, doesn't work for someone autistic. But are we thinking about that in the design? And are we offering at bare minimum, and this kind of goes back to a talk that was on yesterday that Brayton gave, and if you didn't see it, it was a fabulous talk, but about disclosing. Because if people don't feel comfortable to disclose, how are we going to be able to accommodate people now with the systems that we have? So we can make a change, and we are making changes. And if you want to go check out the Haystack booth, you can. This is some of the things that we are doing at Haystack. We are designing universally thought through with all cognitive styles in mind, and being able to collect the right kind of data that would show autistic and neurodivergent job seekers special talents and prove why they're the right candidates for the job. I just wanted to do 2 special thank yous here. One to Nicole. She is our psychometrician, IO psychologist extraordinaire from Haystack. And she and I talk about these things. I mean, I do with everyone, a lot of people, but Nicole and I talk about this almost every day and have done for years now. We're obsessed with being able to help solve this problem. And hopefully you'll be able to see over the coming years and months our solution, our video game coming to life, so check it out. And my final thank you goes to Catherine, who I'm sure all of you know. If you don't, would be weird that you were here, but if you don't know her, please find her. She's one of the most fabulous humans on earth. Thank you, Catherine, for a fabulous conference, bringing everyone together, fabulous content, the art, the music, beautiful speakers, a vibrant, very diverse agenda, and I'm so pleased and honored to be a part of this. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. All right, I'm not sure what to do now, but...
Well, there's Q&A, or you just walk off the stage.
Hi,
Shelley. I got you. You just, first of all, at the bottom right, hand back the mic. There's some option to give back the mic. So do that, because there you go. And then you'll just want to go back to broadcast or just, end your share. It's just a thing to say that says stop share.